Welcome back. This session is titled Perpetrators and Bystanders of the 21st Century, the New Players in Anti-Semitism. My name is Olivier Melnick. I am with Chosen People Ministries, Northwest Regional Director of Chosen People Ministries, and one of my area of interest in expertise is anti-Semitism. I started looking at it when I was finishing a degree in Chicago at Moody in 2000, and little did I know that it would become I don't want to say a full-time project for me, but it would become a really time-consuming because of what's happening in the world. And what I'm going to try to do in this session here is give you an overview of all the different angles from which it's coming from right now in the 21st century, the anti-Semitism. We'll look at the meaning of it, and we'll look at a little bit of history, and then we'll look at what's happening today. And so when I looked at anti-Semitism, I was working on a couple of papers when I was at Moody, and I started looking at this rebirth of anti-Semitism in like 2000, 1999, and I thought, okay, this is definitely a new anti-Semitism. It's not the old classical anti-Semitism, so to speak, which basically came to its apex during the Holocaust. This is something new. So people were starting to call it the new anti-Semitism, and so I went along with that because that seemed to be a good descriptive for what was happening. It was different. And I'll tell you how it's different and how it's not. But then there's a third one, and I will talk about that as well today in this session. And the third one is the word that I had to coin because I don't think it exists, and it's a morphing of a classical anti-Semitism and the new anti-Semitism, which is taking place now for the last few years. I'd say probably no more than 3 or 4 years, 5 at the most, and I call it eschatological anti-Semitism or new end days anti-Semitism, end times anti-Semitism, eschatological anti-Semitism. So let's look at we're going to look at the perpetrators and the bystanders. And when I talk about perpetrators and bystanders, I want you to understand something from the very beginning. A bystander only facilitates the work of a perpetrator. If we don't do anything, those who do something against the Jews will win. And the bystanders will facilitate. Those who look the other way, like 70 years ago during the Holocaust, during the Second World War, they will, the enemies of the Jews will not completely succeed, but they'll have a greater success if we have a new group of bystanders in the 21st century. So we're going to mostly we're going to be looking at perpetrators. So what we have to understand is that the new anti-Semitism, either new or end times anti-Semitism, it's the same game. The rules are different. The players are different. But the goal is the same. The goal has always been the same. It's the complete eradication of the Jews from the earth. Killing all the Jews from the planet. Okay? And it goes back to Satan, who hates everything that God loves and loves everything that God hates. And God clearly loves Israel and the Jewish people. Now, this being said, when God says that the Jewish people are the apple of his eye, in Zechariah 2:8, when God says that he will never allow for Israel to be destroyed, in Jeremiah 31, 35 to 37, when God says all those nice things about Israel and gives the land and all the promises and the covenants, nowhere in any of those do we find God saying, I love the Jewish people so much that nothing needs to be done for them to be saved. And we want to make that clear from the very beginning. The Jewish people are the apple of God's eyes. They're the chosen people. They're special in God's program. God is going to finish his program with mankind. It's going to hinge around Israel and the Jewish people. Yet, my people still need the gospel to be saved. Just like Nicodemus came to Jesus at night. He was hiding in John 3. He was hiding from the rest of the rabbis. I have a message on this. I call it Nick at Night. Got it? Okay. So, but I couldn't use it because it's been taken by somebody else. But Nicodemus came at night and said, what must I do to be saved? And he thought, hey, you know what, I'm a Jew, I'm a leader of, I'm part of the Sanhedrin, I'm a leader of Israel, I've done it all. I've done it all. I'm the Jew of all Jews. And Jesus tells him, straight up, he said, hey, you got to be born again. So you can be a good Jew, you can be a great Jew, you can be a super Jew, you still need Jesus. Amen? So when I talk about, the Jewish people being special, they're special yet, but they're not saved by virtue of being special. We still need to do what we do. Share the gospel. It's not easy. My people don't like to hear what I have to say, but I'm only telling them what the Word of God says. I'm not making it up. Okay? So it's the same game. This game, it's not a game really, anti-Semitism, but it's the same. The rules have changed. The players, as we're going to see this morning, are very different, but the goal is the same: the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. And before all of us as believers point the finger at the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the Jews, we always want to put that in perspective, that all of us have the ability to hate. If it was not for God's grace in our life and changing us into a new creature, and even after we are saved, even after we become part of the family of God, we still have the ability to hate because we still have our fallen nature, fallen body until we receive our glorified body. So the heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? Just want to put that in perspective. Jeremiah 17:9. Now, we want to look at 3 different anti-Semitism. Again, classic, new anti-Semitism, and eschatological anti-Semitism. I don't know why I came up with a word so complicated to say. Eschatological anti-Semitism. I think you think when you coin a word, you coin something that's easy to say? No. So eschatological anti-Semitism. Okay. Now let me give you my definition. There's many of them, and I put one word in red, and even more so in now with the eschatological anti-Semitism. This has become more of a reality more than ever. As a matter of fact, I actually did not have that word in my original definition. I added it in the last few years because of end times anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the irrational hatred of the Jewish people characterized by destructive thoughts, words, and or actions against them or their property. By the way, if you email me or contact me, I can give you the entire set of PowerPoint so you won't have to take all the notes and you can concentrate on hearing what I have to say. So you don't have to write. I can just send you the notes exactly the way they are here, if it helps you at all. So anti-Semitism is irrational. And that is what we see more than ever before in this new end times anti-Semitism, is the irrationality of it. We're going to see that we have people from the liberal left and people from radical Islam, 2 completely different ideologies that agree on nothing except for one thing: killing the Jews. Getting rid of Israel. It's crazy. It is irrational. Because you put a radical Muslim and a liberal in the same room, only one is going to come out. If you're lucky. They don't agree on anything. If you put them in the same room to plan on how to kill the Jews, maybe they'll come out together. Anti-Semitism goes further, as it is the only kind of hatred that includes contempt for the people, the land, and the law. All aspects of Jewish life, customs, and culture, along with the Jewish homeland, are affected by its poison. So let's look at, really it's an overview of an overview, going to today, because I want to spend most of my time on the new end times anti-Semitism. But the classic anti-Semitism from biblical times to the Shoah. The Shoah is the Hebrew word for the Holocaust. That's the word they use actually in Europe. They don't call it Holocaust, they call it the Shoah. From biblical times to the Shoah, about 75 years ago. It went from theological anti-Judaism to racial anti-Semitism. That slide, I teach a class that takes care of that slide. That's a 20 session of an hour and a half each. So how can I do that in one slide? Well, I just did. But I'm not going to cover all the details. There's so much, and maybe I can come back another time and do the history of the Jews through anti-Semitism from the biblical canon to to the global jihad. We talk about the Middle Ages and the Crusades and Luther. And I mean, it's a long, long, long process. But basically, what started as a theological anti-Judaism, a difference between the Christians and the Jews, we don't agree, we don't understand each other. It was mostly theological. And then laws were written and enacted, and then the people took the law in their own hands. And it became when it became in the Holocaust, where it became this racial anti-Semitism, when basically the Jews had become a subhuman race, a vermin that needed to be destroyed. And that's what happened with the 6 million, one of them being my grandfather. The new anti-Semitism from the Shoah to today. And really, from 1945 until the mid-60s, the world had thought that the motto of the Jewish people, never again, had actually taken root, and that anti-Semitism was dead. Because there was not really anywhere in the world where you could talk about the Shoah, the Holocaust, and not be frowned upon, or people would say, I don't want to talk about it. It was taboo. It was so fresh in the mind of people, it was taboo. You did not talk about the Holocaust. You did not talk about Nazi anti-Semitism. So it was kind of, taboo. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And we thought, hey, you know what? Maybe anti-Semitism is dead. When in reality, anti-Semitism had just been swept under the carpet. And, for a time, it looked like it disappeared, but it has resurfaced. And it resurfaced strongly in the shape of the new anti-Semitism, which probably in the mid-60s, early 70s, and it started slow. But we started to, over a couple of decades, we started to see that now anti-Semitism was no longer relegated to the borders of Europe, Eastern Europe, and part of Western Europe, where basically the train system would go, is where the Nazis would come get the Jewish people. The borders are now global. With the internet, with the social networks, with the way we travel, and the way our societies are, basically now there's no borders. The new borders are that there's no borders. It's everywhere and anywhere. And by the way, what makes the Holocaust unique is that the Holocaust was the only genocide that included that when the perpetrators actually went out of their way to bring the victims back to their death. In any other genocide or ethnic cleansing, there's two people group fighting. There's one people group telling the other one, we don't like you, we're going to kill you if you stick around. So those leave, they become refugees over the history of mankind. They leave, they go to a different country, they cross the border, and then good riddance. In the case of the Jews, the Nazis would actually go out of their way to send trains to bring the Jews back and take them to their death in the death camps. That's the only difference between that one and all the other genocides, that this one was organized and the Nazis went out of their way to bring people back. It was not enough that the Jews would leave. We had to go get him, bring him back, and kill him. Very unique, very different. So now the borders are new. The borders are now that there's no borders. It's anywhere, and nobody is safe anymore. As a matter of fact, if something happens in Israel, a new settlement or a new law is passed, or something happens of any sort in Israel, and if you're Jewish in Paris, or if you're Jewish in Buenos Aires, or in Canada, or in Asia, you could be suffering from it. You have nothing to do with what happened in Israel, but by proxy, so to speak, a modern-day Jew is now responsible for everything that Israel and the Jews of Israel are doing. That's a big difference in the new anti-Semitism. So this new borders and new methodology basically is that now it's not so much a racial anti-Semitism as much as it is a quest for social justice, and we're painting the victims into perpetrators and the perpetrators into victims. It's been a role reversal between the Jews, the Palestinians and the Israelis, or the Jews and the Arabs, where one who's the victim is becoming the perpetrator, and it's the other way around. The perpetrators are now being the victims in the media. Now, this is not to say that all Jewish people are perfect. This is not to say that all Israelis are perfect, or that the Israeli government is without fault. There is corruption in the Israeli government. The minute you have a government anywhere you want, there's always going to be corruption. Anywhere. I don't care where it is. So it's not perfect yet to make this, to have this shift where the victims are becoming the perpetrators is crazy. And the new source, the source is still Satan. The source continues to be Satan, who wants to destroy the Jews. And the reason why he wants to destroy the Jews is because Satan knows that at the end, when the Jewish people call upon the one whom they have pierced, not, that scripture says the one whom they have pierced, it doesn't mean that the Jews are responsible for the crucifixion of Yeshua. I mean, all of us are, okay? He gave his life for you and me, and if anybody is guilty of crucifying him, well, I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, all of us. Amen? But when the Jewish people recognize that, they're going to call upon him. They're going to say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Yeshua is going to come back. That's the second coming, not the rapture. That's at the end of the tribulation. And that's Satan's career comes to an end at that time. So Satan knows that when the Jews call upon Yeshua, his career is over. And as we talked about in the first hour, this is starting to happen now. The Jews are going back to the land, and they're going to call on Yeshua all from the land. We read about this in Zechariah 12 and 13. So Satan doesn't like his retirement plan. So he wants to postpone that. And he figures if he can get the Jews as, diametrically opposed to Jesus, he said, if I can put the Jews on this end and Jesus on the other end, then I'm doing good. And that's exactly what he's done over the centuries. To the point where my people don't want to believe in Jesus. We believe in anything else or nothing, but not Jesus. It's very sad. It's very sad because he is the Jewish Messiah. So the source is the same. It's Satan. He wants to destroy the Jews. And now he used over the centuries all kinds of different people, up to using the Nazi government and the Vichy government in France in the Second World War. They helped the Nazis. Now he's using new people under the guise of social justice and the Jews being the new Nazis of the Middle East, and the poor Palestinians only throwing rocks and all those things that you see on television that are so far from the truth. So this is the source now. Eschatological anti-Semitism from today to the second coming. I believe we're in it right now. New anti-Semitism and eschatological anti-Semitism actually kind of overlap. We see a little bit of both right now, but we see a new push from this eschatological anti-Semitism, which is a hybrid of classic anti-Semitism and new anti-Semitism, currently growing worldwide and stopping at nothing. Now, let's look at a biblical basis for a second. Eschatology is a study of end times as presented in God's Word up to the eternal order. It's interesting, in the Talmud, in Bereshit Rabbah, it says, if you shall see the kingdoms rising against each other in turn, then give heed and note the footsteps of the Messiah. And we read this in the Jewish Talmud, which is a commentary on the Jewish law, but it's not part of the Bible, but it's incredibly helpful, good commentary on Jewish writings. And in Matthew 24:7 through 8, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes, but all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. So let's note that nation against nation is a Jewish idiom for world conflict. It's a Jewish way of saying it. World War I gave Zionism its momentum. World War II opened the door for the birth of modern Israel. And a lot of people, actually, a lot of historians would actually tell you that World War I and World War II were actually one unit of history. There was a time in between the two, but really they see it as one big unit of nation against nation. So the start of the end of the age can be traced back to three birth pangs. World War I in 1914-1918, Matthew 24. Then another birth pang is the birth of Israel, 1948, for the regathering of the Jewish people in unbelief, as we're seeing right now. And we see some of those in Ezekiel 20 and Ezekiel 22. And then one more thing had to happen, part of those birth pangs, is the Jewish control of Jerusalem for the rebuilding of the Tribulation Temple. which is not condoned by God, but it's still going to be it's going to be rebuilt. It's not the temple that God cares about, but it's going to be rebuilt because halfway through it's going to be desecrated by the Antichrist. It has to be rebuilt, and that birth pang, the Jewish control of Jerusalem, took place during the Six-Day War of 1967. So, a couple of additional prophecies. All nations come against Jerusalem on the issue of control over Jerusalem. All nations come against Israel on the issue of control over Jerusalem, as seen in Zechariah 12, 1-3. The burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel, thus declares the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth, and forms the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. And it will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. So we see prophecies about people going after Israel. All nations against Israel will be destroyed by God. Zechariah 12, 8, 9. In that day the Lord will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the one who is feeble among them in that day will be like King David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of the Lord before them. And in that day I will set out to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. There's a day coming when that's going to happen. That God is going to set about to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. So, in a moment, we're going to start seeing about all the people that are really going after Jerusalem. And some of them are not nations. Some of them are like just, groups or corporations or churches or ideologies or religions. But it doesn't matter. God is going to go after everybody who goes after Jerusalem. Many will be deceived by false messiahs. That's what we know. All nations will go against Jerusalem and against Israel and Jerusalem. We're starting to see this right now with this new eschatological anti-Semitism. The Great Tribulation, which is coming in the future, is also known as the time of Jacob's trouble, and that's a way of saying that this is really a time where God is going to discipline and chastise and regather Israel to himself. And God will punish all those who go against him on that plan and against Israel. So, we are right now seeing a lot of people going after Israel, after Jerusalem, and after the Jews all over the world. And again, I believe that this is part of this last wave, Satan's last attempt at destroying the Jews from the earth. When did it start? I think that we can say that it started in 2006. Now, I'm not going to be dogmatic about it because, again, the new anti-Semitism and eschatological anti-Semitism still overlap a little bit. But in 2006, and really the first one, I have the name of the victim, and the next three, I have the name of the perpetrators. But those are events that we remember by those names. That's why I use the name that people remember them by. And some of them you might not remember, you might not even know. In 2006, a Jewish man was taken in France, in Paris, and he was taken by a gang called the Gang of the Barbarians, and he was burned all over his body and left for dead, and he actually died on the way to the hospital. They had tried to get a ransom from his rabbi. It didn't work, and they basically killed him, and that's when the French Jewish community marched on the street of Paris, and that's when they realized, okay, this is not safe anymore. We're not safe in France anymore. But that's also when immigration started to pick up speed a little bit, but not quite as much as 10 years later, which is today. But we're starting to see this. This man was tortured for hours upon hours, kept for 2 weeks, and then left for dead, and he died on the way to the hospital. And in 2012, in the south of France, in Toulouse, there was a man by the name of Mohamed Merah, and he actually killed 7 people, including a rabbi and 3 kids in a Jewish day school in Toulouse, in south of France. That was the first multiple killing of Jewish people since there was one before 2006, but it was still Arab Jewish, but it was more isolated. But it was I think it was in 2002. But 0612 is Mohamed Merah when he killed several Jewish people. Then Mehdi Nemouche is the guy who in Belgium went to the Jewish Museum and started shooting people. And of course, Amédi Koulibaly in January 2015, not 2150. There's a typo there. The zero should be a parenthesis, okay? And he is the man that walked in that kosher supermarket 15 minutes before, my niece was there, I told you about. So Amédi Koulibaly is the guy who killed the 4 people. These are what we see here is we see people being killed. Until recently, outside of Israel and terrorism and Israelis and Arabs, we did not see people killing Jews. Not picking up speed. Now we're talking about killing people. We're not talking about spraying a swastika on a tombstone or burning a Torah scroll. That's bad enough. But we're not talking about that anymore. That continues to happen. But now we're seeing people being killed. It's picking up speed, my friends. And there's more. 2014, there was a Jerusalem synagogue massacre, and a guy walked with a machete, not a machete, with a meat cleaver. And then in New York, the Chabad is an Orthodox Jewish sect of Judaism, and the Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn, this man walked in and started shooting people, and of course the Paris kosher supermarket in 2015. So we see those, they continue, and they are going to continue. So 2006, about 10 years ago, is when we can trace the beginning of this new wave of eschatological anti-Semitism. Now, who are the players? Well, you've got the obvious ones. The Islamic State. It's got more names than we can shake a stick at. ISIS, ISIL. I don't call it ISIL for reasons that you probably understand. But I call it ISIS. Other people call it ISIL, and I don't like it. But the Islamic State, ISIS, or Daesh, which is their name, their Arabic name. They call for the extermination of all Jews. Now, they don't stop at the Jews. We've seen that. But they call for the extermination of all Jews in all Israel. And they say if you cannot join ISIS, kill the Jews wherever you are. They say, you know what? Don't have to join us. Just kill. You know Jews? Just kill them. That's what they say. So we have ISIS. We have more under radical Islam, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Fatah. And we've seen now in the last couple of, probably about a year and a half, what's known as spontaneous intifada. Intifada means uprising. We don't have a third intifada quite yet, like the first 2 that took place for several years in Israel. But now we have a spontaneous intifada, which is basically somebody walking the streets of Israel. I'm kind of scaring my wife here because we're going to Israel in about 3 weeks. But I don't feel unsafe. But you walk and you go to the bus stop and somebody's going to stab you, or somebody's going to run a car into a building. But he's not going to do it when we're there. No. Okay, good. That's known as spontaneous intifada. A push for an unilateral 2-state solution, and of course a push for international recognition of Palestine. Now, radical Islam is a problem. We know that. And I don't believe in radical Islam. And the reason why I don't believe in radical Islam is because I believe that, first of all, where is the Muslim outrage? Where are the Muslims on the streets saying, stop this is not us? I don't find them anywhere. There was one imam in Paris, maybe 2, but one that was public about the attacks, saying like, this is not who we are. One imam. The Muslim population of France is the largest of Europe, close to 11 million. Sorry, 6 million, 11%. Always get that backwards. 6 million. But that's 10 times the Jewish population. Where is the Muslim outrage? I believe that radical Islam, I believe that Islam is a problem. And if I get in trouble for that, well, I'm going to say it like it is. A good Muslim, to me, a good Muslim is a Muslim who's a radical Muslim. Now let me explain that. Let me explain that, because that sentence could be taken the wrong way 2 or 3 different ways. Okay, so I need to unpack this a little bit. It's important. When you read the Quran, and I do not claim that I have read the entire Quran, but I've read enough of the Quran and the Hadith and the commentaries, that I know that when you read the Quran, it is clear that a good Muslim, according to what Allah is telling him, is supposed to kill the infidels if they're not going to convert to Islam. There's no way around that. So we call it radical Islam because we recognize that it is radical in its thinking, but I don't think that radical Islam is any different than Orthodox Islam. It's the same. A moderate Muslim, and now people are going to come and say, well, Olivier, so many people are Muslims, they want nothing to do with that. They're good Muslims, they're peaceful Muslims, they're moderate Muslim. I believe that a moderate Muslim is not a Muslim who's looking at the Quran and restructuring and doing a reform of the Quran. It's simply a Muslim who doesn't understand the Quran and doesn't apply it to his life. Because if you apply it, if you don't take a verse here and a verse there, you have no choice. So that's why when I say I don't believe in radical Islam, I don't believe there's a difference between radical Islam and Orthodox Islam. If you truly believe that the Quran is the word of Allah and you should follow it, then according to what the Quran teaches, it is not a religion of peace. Now you could take stuff out and say, I want to be a peaceful Muslim. Then you become a cultural Muslim who was born in a Muslim family who does not place a lot of value on the Quran. And guess what? Those are killed by their own. So they're making my case. So that's for that. Let me take a deep breath here. But some of the new players, we're starting to see people. So of course radical Islam is going to push for the destruction of Israel. But that's the obvious. Tell me something I don't know, Olivier. I mean, we know that. Okay? UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, 2011, made a push for unilateral two-state solution and a push for international recognition of Palestine. And I think since then, they have recognized Palestine as a state. Of course, European Union joins in. In November, December of 14, Sweden, England, Ireland, and France, and Spain have recognized Palestine as a valid state. Recognized Palestine as a valid state. I think the Pope is also working on that. He's got other issues, but we're not going to go there. December 14, the International Criminal Court in The Hague has upgraded Palestine to the status of non-state observer. So now we have a terrorist state that is increasingly gaining support from world institutions. And we're not talking about corporations and the NGOs. We're talking about the International Criminal Court. If Palestine gets a full status it's not if, it's when, really. When Palestine gets a full status at the International Criminal Court, then they'll be able to vote against Israel and then really reinforce this false premise that Israel is committing crimes against humanity. Recently, the last article I wrote on the United Nations declared about a week ago that Israel was the #1 country in the world mistreating women, violating human rights of women. Israel! Do you know that if you're a Palestinian terrorist, a female Palestinian terrorist, you tried to explode yourself on the streets of Jerusalem, you, by a miracle of God, survive, the first thing that the Israelis will put you in an ambulance, take you to hospital, and treat you. Try that on the other side. You don't even have to explode yourself. Just walk a few steps. You take your life in your own hands. What's going on here? So the European Union is just buying the whole thing hook, line, and sinkers, drinking the Kool-Aid of Palestinian narrative, and it doesn't stop here. Liberals, I'm very conservative. But I have friends who are liberals. I mean, it's hard to talk with them because I don't understand their logic. But government, universities, Hollywood, and the media accusing Israel of occupation, apartheid, and murder, ignoring the facts and believing the lies. Go to Israel, visit the land, see for yourself. So you've got the liberals, and that's part of the irrational aspect of this anti-Semitism, the eschatological anti-Semitism, is that now we've got liberals. I mean, you've got, what was it the other day that I saw on the internet, people marching on the streets either in San Francisco or New York. It was, it was, excuse my French, I can say that, I was born there. It was this, Queers for Palestine. Think about the oxymoron in that statement. Queers for Palestine. If any of these people who have a homosexual lifestyle decide that they want to support Palestine from the U.S., if they were to move to the Middle East, how long would they make it? I don't get it. But this is the irrationality and the Queers for Palestine walking on the streets of San Francisco, I believe. I'm not sure where it was, but it was recent. It was within a year. Supporting Palestine and promoting the boycott, divestment, sanction, the BDS movement. And but of course, nobody's interested in the facts anymore. And then, just when you thought it was bad, it gets worse. You get the self-defeating Jews. The Jews who help the Arabs to kill the Jews. Wait a minute. Yes, they exist. There's a group called Neturei Karta, the Guardians of the City, since 1938. Their lead rabbi, I believe, to this day goes by the name of Yisrael David Weiss, and I think he also lives in San Francisco. Orthodox Jews against Zionism, calling for a dismantling of the state of Israel. They claim that the Jews do not have the right to live in Israel until Mashiach comes, not returns, because they don't believe he has come yet, until Mashiach comes. So they're very scary. They dress Orthodox, but they will go to Iran for a conference on Holocaust denial, or meeting with when he was the prime minister or president of Iran, Ahmadinejad. I like the other name I used for him, Ahmadinejad, but I don't think I came up with it. I stole it from somebody at some point. Okay, so you got another group of self-defeating Jews, liberal Jews, the J Street, which is a liberal organization that basically is a group of ultra-liberal Jews claiming to seek a two-state solution, but facilitating the anti-Semitic agenda of groups like Hamas. So these Jews, Neturei Karta and J Street, and there's another group, the name escapes me right now. It has to do with the color, but I can't remember, but there's the same liberal group. They're in bed with the enemy. But they're Jews. You know, when I am accused of being a traitor to my people because I put my faith in the death and resurrection of Yeshua Jesus for my sins, and I find him to be the Jewish Messiah who saved me from eternity in a pit of hell and to be in the presence of God for eternity, when I find that to be the truth, I'm called a traitor by my own people. But Jews like this, who are in bed with Hamas and Iran and even maybe ISIS if they could, and they probably do, they're the real traitors. They're the real traitors. I had to include some of the evangelicals. Not you. Relax. But they're there. Okay? I had breakfast recently on the other side of the state towards Salem and Alliance, where we're staying. I had a breakfast with a bunch of pastors, and I was walking on thin ice. There were 6 pastors. A couple of them were from PCUSA, and one was from a Lutheran. It was several different denominations that don't really like Israel, and so in 2014, I remember my wife and I were watching it. It was painfully. It was long. It was the voting of their General Assembly when they vote all those different things, and they voted in favor of BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction against Israel, the PCUSA. So it's a denomination within the Presbyterian Church, PCUSA, and so I'm having breakfast with those pastors last Tuesday, and they asked me, the pastor who invited me asked me to kind of share about the ministry and my area of expertise. So I get to talk about this. And at some point I said, now, even within the church we have enemies. And I look around, I'm going like, I'm going to die here. This is it, And it turned out that the 2 PCUSA, one had left the church. He said, well, when that happened, I left. And the other one said, we haven't left yet, but we voted against it. And if they continue, we're going to leave. So I was in good company. So it was very encouraging to me, but it exists. So part of this eschatological anti-Semitism is now we have the left, radical Muslim, extreme right, like neo-Nazis. Even that is coming back with the I'm not even sure it's in my presentation, but with the coming back of the coming in of the migrants in Europe, we have parties like in Hungary, the Jobbik Party, which is a populist party, or the Front National in France, or the FND, I forgot the letters for Germany, the Populist Party, which is basically neo-Nazi in a different word. And they say, well, we have to protect our borders. To an extent, I agree with them, except that really what they're saying, they're not saying we have to protect our borders from the migrants. They're saying we have to protect our borders from anybody who's not looking like us. So blacks, Jews, Hispanics, out. And of course, Jews before anybody else. So those are very dangerous, but they're popular right now because of the crisis, the migrant crisis in Europe, which is, taking a turn for the worse. It's proportions that it can't be stopped. It cannot be stopped what's happening in Europe right now. It's probably going to end up in a civil war. It's really crazy. But so we have the and I don't know why I went there because evangelicals, radical Islam, extreme right or neo-Nazis. So we've got the evangelicals. So we have denominational loyalties like PCUSA. We've got people who would look like, I would love if I would meet this lady in a supermarket. I'd probably engage in conversation with her. She looks really nice. She is completely clueless, but she looks very nice. She's wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh, and she says, divest, free Palestine. And I maybe she did go to Israel. I don't know, but I don't understand how in this divestment, the BDS movement. I do not understand the logic behind it. If you look at the things that were invented by Israelis, those who want to do, I'm not against boycott. Okay, a boycott is a good thing. In my own personal life, over the years, I have chosen for my own thing. I don't even tell people about it. I have chosen to boycott certain things, and I've tried to be consistent with those things. My wife will tell you I have been doing the best I could. Not many, but a few. And I try to be consistent. When you're going to boycott something or someone, be consistent, and then you'll have my respect. So, if you want to boycott Israel, then don't use a computer because Intel chip was created in Israel. Don't use a cell phone because the technology for the cell phone was invented in Israel. Don't use a thumb drive. So basically, go back to the Stone Age. Not quite, but you get my drift. If you're going to boycott Israel, don't pick and choose. Don't call it the boycott because, we're going to boycott Israel because they're being an apartheid state. You boycott Israel, boycott everything. Everything that comes from Israel. And you're going to find out that there's a lot more than you think. I need to see where I am here. I need to go to a couple of... Okay, I want to show you a couple of different movies that came out. I'm just, for sake of time here, because you're not listening fast enough. So, for sake of time, a couple of movies that came out a few years ago. One is called With God on Our Side. Christian Zionism, and those are the quotes on the movie, on the video. They're probably online now. I got the DVDs when they came out, but they're probably online. Christian Zionism is officially on notice. Christianity Today said that. And then Tony Campolo, not that I have particular care for the man, but he's loved in the evangelical circles. Informative, inspiring, challenging. And then the previous VP of World Vision, I dare anyone to see this film and remain unchanged. With God on Our Side is basically taking the Palestinian narrative and then pushing it on the forefront, saying again, victims are, the Palestinians are the victims, and the Israelis are the perpetrators. They're the new Nazis of the Middle East. Then another one, and this one even says that it says it all on the picture. You have an Arab man with the Palestinian keffiyeh, and he's got a button on his jacket of Martin Luther King. So the message it's sending is that the Arabs are fighting for human rights, like the civil rights movement of the 50s, with Martin Luther King. So, which is not true, of course, and it's promoted and endorsed by Lynn Hybels. What's her husband's name? Bill Hybels of a big church in Chicago. I think every American, certainly every Christian, should watch this film. I went to listen to her 3 years ago when she came to Seattle to promote this. And again, very, very sad that evangelicals who used to be Christian Zionists are now becoming Christian Palestinianists and turning the whole narrative, the pro-Israel into pro-Palestine. Of course, I don't have much time to talk about it, but every 2 years we have this conference called there is this conference known as Christ at the Checkpoint. If you go to my website, www.newantisemitism.com, www.newantisemitism.com. I have written several articles of it over the last 5 years, but in the last month or so, I've written 2 articles. One of them analyzing their charter. They have a 10 or 12-point charter of what they believe and why they do what they do, and I look at Scripture to back it up. And some I agreed with, and some I did not agree with, and it's all there. If you do a search on my site for Christ as a Checkpoint. I was so sad this year when I actually spent about an hour listening to Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible Answer Man. I used to listen to him when my wife first led me to the Lord. I love that guy. It was so cool to listen to his radio show. I might have even called him a couple of times. Listen to his radio show, and this guy knows so much about the Bible. How can you know so much about the Bible and end up turning on Israel? I mean, if you ask me, Olivier, how is it possible? My answer is, I don't know. Unless the enemy is doing a job in this man's mind or something. I don't know. How can you turn on Israel after being so educated and helping so many understand the Bible? You should have seen, and I don't waste your time, you can if you want, but this video of his presentation was anti-Semitism. It was anti-Semitism at best. And it was so bad. The Jews have no place in the land. They're displacing the poor Palestinians. Zionism is racism, and on and on and on. From the Bible Answer Man. And standing ovation. And so there was a lot of other people at that conference. It's every 2 years. And we need to, maybe you need to just go to the site for one reason. And I would recommend you do that. Go not to listen. I mean, the topic is always going to be the same. They hate the Jews. It's supposed to be on reconciliation, by the way, since it started 6 years ago. Reconciliation. Last time I checked, reconciliation took 2 sides and compromise. This one is we'll reconcile as long as you do everything we want. That's not reconciliation. That's taken over. But go to the site and look at who was a speaker. And be aware, be educated about who's a speaker and who's turned on Israel. Hank Hanegraaff is one of them. Gary Burge is a professor at Wheaton College. He's turned on Israel. There's many, many more. So, and I told your pastor I was not going to drop names. So, yeah, I know. And this is online too, so I mean, okay, I'm going to have to duck when I go home. Okay, so eschatological, let me wrap this up because it's about that time. And eschatological anti-Semitism is the last stage in worldwide anti-Semitism before Yeshua's return. It is only going to increase exponentially in intensity and frequency. It now incorporates the killing of Jewish people. That's what makes it like the next level. And not only by radical Muslims. You've got radical Islam, you've got the right, you've got the left, you've got the liberals. It's a multi-pronged vice squeezing the Jews from all angles. It is a hybrid of classical anti-Semitism and the new anti-Semitism. Now, it doesn't mean that we have entered into the Great Tribulation. It doesn't mean that. Okay? We don't want to overreact here. It creates a renewed sense of urgency to share the good news of Yeshua with our Jewish friends and family. And really, this is, I'm going to skip the rest because I think I told you about this. Yes. I'll just finish with this. Look at this quote by a... I forgot. I didn't put his name. It's not mine. It's Ian Kershaw. Ian Kershaw is a historian who wrote a biography of Hitler, a very good one. And he said the road to Auschwitz was built by hate, but paved with indifference. And to this I add the second part. The road to another Holocaust is being rebuilt by hate, but now paved with political correctness and apathy. Anti-Semitism builds an unlikely bridge and creates unexpected bonds between us and the rest of the Jewish community. He used them in prayer and outreach in relationship. I actually have opportunities to speak to Jewish people on Twitter, on Facebook, in person, when they say, well, you're not a Jew anymore, you're a Christian, you believe in Jesus, you're crazy, you're a traitor. I said, listen, my mother survived the Holocaust, her dad died in Auschwitz, my dad was Jewish, my whole family is Jewish. When they come to get the Jews again, are they going to ask me if I believe in Jesus? No. They're going to say, you're a Jew? For them, the enemies, I'm a Jew. So let's agree on one thing. I'm a Jew, you're a Jew, and when it comes to, and when I talk to a Jewish person, I'm talking about, let's fight anti-Semitism together. And then for you, those who are not, the rest of the believers who are in the body of Messiah in the church and who are not Jewish, you have a tremendous opportunity to educate yourself. And I know you do this here in this church because I know you're a pastor, and I know your love and your passion for knowledge of the truth, not just the biblical truth, but the truth about what's going on in the world. For you, you need to understand something. Just let me close with that. Now, you know when a preacher says, let me close with that, there's no guarantee. Okay. So, let me close with that. Christians walking into, Gentile Christians, non-Jews like you, walk into a relationship or conversation with a Jewish person with unseen baggage. You walk into every relationship or conversation with Jewish people with picture yourself with two large suitcases. You get into the conversation, you walk in, you put them down, and you start the conversation about Jesus and God's love and Christianity. And then your Jewish friend, you don't see them, but your Jewish friend sees the two suitcases, and inside those are the Crusades, the Inquisition, the Middle Ages, Martin Luther, the Holocaust, up to today, the evangelical Christian Palestinianism and all those things. It's in those suitcases because to my people, that's what Christianity is all about. They're uneducated about it, but they know enough that those things happen in the name of Christ, in the name of Christianity. So you need to be aware that you cannot, as a Christian, leave that baggage home when you get into a conversation or a relationship with a Jewish friend. You can't. It's with you everywhere you go. So the best way to handle it is to know what's inside. Because when your friend says, well, what about Martin Luther? What about the Holocaust? What about the Inquisition? What about this? What about that? Know about it. Know about it. So you say, well, Christians made mistakes too. Not all the people who call themselves Christians are Christians. Let's concentrate on what the Bible is saying more than what man is saying. So there's many ways you can do that, but we can use, anti-Semitism is not going away, but God is not taking Israel away. God is not destroying Israel. He's promised He would never do that. God has not replaced Israel with the church either. If God has replaced Israel with the church, then He would not be a covenant maker, but He would be a covenant breaker. And then He could have replaced the way we get saved by something else that we're not even aware of, so maybe none of us are saved. God doesn't change. Amen? So, and by the way, I've stopped my presentation about 10 minutes ago, so I'm going on fumes here. So I got to stop. Because I could go another hour. But let me close with a word of prayer. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, Steve. Can we? Okay, I'm going to close with a word of prayer, and then we'll have a few minutes for Q&A. If you have them, if not, we'll just wrap this up. Okay, Lord, thank you for given us this great burden of reaching the Jewish people, my people, with the gospel of Yeshua. You changed my life 33 years ago, Lord, and you've given me this burden to educate anybody who wants to hear about it, about the history of the Jewish people and the history of anti-Semitism and how we can make a difference, and getting educated and sharing with others about what we know, and then speaking up against crimes of anti-Semitism against the Jewish community and exposing the lies, Lord. So thank you for making us vocal, making us stand up and speak up. And thank you for using us to further your kingdom. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. So if you have questions, I'm here. Yes. And I realize we're past the time, but I'm still under the hour and 15 minutes that John usually uses. So I think I'm okay. And I would love nothing more than to tell him I went longer than you. Yes.
Is this on? Okay. Could you clarify one thing? Was Hank Hanegraaff at Christ at the Checkpoint, or was
Yes.
this? He was.
He was at Christ at the Checkpoint. He was one of the speakers. That's what I said. Go to the site of Christ at the Christ at the Checkpoint 2016 and see. Look, click on the list of speakers. He, amongst other people, was there. You might not recognize the name of many of the others. I'm more familiar with them because I've been studying this for several years. But Hank Hanegraaff was one of their speakers. Very well received, as you would expect. He was there.
What do you think is going on with that structure that's from the Temple of Baal being repositioned in Times Square and Trafalgar Square? What do you think is really going on there?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on, except it's a waste of real estate, that's for sure. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a connection biblically specific to a verse that we can think of, except that it shows the depravity of man and how far man is willing to go away from God. But beyond that, I'm not in a place that I can give you an educated answer.
I think that's what they call it, the solstice. There's the springtime solstice. It's the Baal worshipers, and as opposed to the Jewish, like at this time right now that we're in, there's a lot of occultic worship.
I haven't looked at it enough. I haven't looked at it enough. All I can tell you is that usually when those things like this happen and it takes a turn for the worse, the Jews get blamed. So I don't know who's doing it. I know there's two temples, one being built in the Middle East and one being built in New York. But I haven't read a whole lot about it because I don't see it as being critical to end times. And I really don't like to speculate too much. I mean, critical to end times, it is an indication of the depravity of the human heart. Yes, I give you that much, absolutely. But I don't see it as a fulfillment of, this prophetic verse, or so that's why I'd rather spend time on other things. So I mean, maybe I should look at it more, but I don't have more information about it. You have any more questions? No more questions? Once? Twice? We're done. Thank you very much.